Hello and welcome to my session. My name is McLoughlin. I'm currently UK Field CTO at Nerdio. Today I'm going to talk to you about Azure Virtual Desktop. So we're going to go through a couple of scenarios, what you need to consider, and how Nerdio can help you deploy your Azure Virtual Desktop solution. Okay, so let's see what we're going to cover. So we're going to do an overview of Azure Virtual Desktop. We're going to look at the high-level architecture and then sort of think about what some considerations that you need to think about when you deploy Azure Virtual Desktop. And then we're going to discuss how Nerdio can help manage and deploy Azure Virtual Desktop. And then if you have time, we'll do some demos as well, and just so it all kind of fits together. Okay, so Azure Virtual Desktop is obviously a DaaS solution from Microsoft, and enables you to sort of migrate your desktops into Azure. Okay, so that enables us to sort of deliver Windows 11 desktops as well. So we can sort of virtualize applications, virtualize the desktops, have them in kind of any Azure data center throughout the world, and give you total flexibility of how you want to deploy and manage your environment. And we also support Windows 365 as well, which is the new service from Microsoft. And one of the reasons why a lot of people deploy Azure Virtual Desktop is down to security. Okay, so keeping your sort of your data and your applications hosted inside the data center is a very secure solution, and so it sort of helps with sort of data sovereignty and all those kind of things, and enables you to sort of back up your data. And obviously, we've all been through the scenario where you're hosting your local data on the laptop and the laptop gets stolen, that kind of thing. So if you're hosting within Azure Virtual Desktop solution, that will get fixed as well. And scaling, obviously, during the pandemic, we noticed sort of people deploying stuff at a very rapid rate. So obviously, people deploying physical laptops is a lot more difficult to deploy sort of virtual machines. So obviously, go down to your hardware store or supplier and ask them for 5,000 laptops. It's going to be a bit of a wait, but we can literally deploy Azure Virtual Desktop machines in the tens of thousands or 5,000 or 500 in a matter of hours. It was unheard of during the pandemic, where in some cases we had like 5,000 desktops deployed within 24 hours. Lots of crazy stories like that. So obviously reduction costs using licenses. So you'll find that within Azure Virtual Desktop, you're probably more than likely already licensed to use it. So if you've got your sort of M365 kind of E3, E5 licenses, you'll be licensed for it. So definitely look into that, and you'll find the only extra cost that you need to pay for are your extra sort of computer storage, which we'll go through as part of this presentation. So how does it work out? So eventually, the Azure Virtual Desktop solution, the core of it is managed by Microsoft. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. So gone are the days where you have to wheel lots of kit into a data center, spend lots of time doing on networking, bring up the storage, all those kind of stuff. Azure sort of Microsoft manage the Azure Virtual Desktop backend for you, so they manage it and they fully support it. Okay, so that means that we can just really crack on and do what we need to do to keep your environment sort of the best it can be. And then obviously we can support different operating systems with Azure Virtual Desktop. So we can support Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. We can support Windows Server 2012 R2 if you need to. But remember, if you do that, you still need to have your RDS CALs in place as well. And if you really wanted to, for legacy reasons or you've got application support problems, you can still run Windows 7, but I wouldn't advise it if possible. And obviously, we can assign different sort of policies and stuff to that as well. So we can use what we call FSOSIC for profile management. You can sort of use Intune for MEM as well if you need to as well. So lots and lots of ways to control Azure Virtual Desktop. It's very, very integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. So yeah, a very, very good solution. Okay, so one of the big things, as I mentioned before, why people bring in is it's because of security, essentially. Okay, so you can really leverage all the Azure security services using Azure Virtual Desktop. So it plugs nicely into Azure Firewall, so you can deploy Azure Firewall into your solution, Azure Security Center, Sentinel, all those kind of stuff. They all work very, very nicely with Windows Virtual Desktop. And conditional access is definitely something which you want to look at deploying. So using conditional access, I can set rules for my users. So I can basically say, oh, only allow from this location, or only allow if they're using Windows 10 with all the updates on it, or only select like Windows 10 1809 minimum version, those kind of things, or only allow access if you're using MFA, for example. So lots of control to keep your security team happy. So we don't want bad people accessing the AVD solution and accessing your data. So lots of different ways to do that, and compliance as well. So obviously Compliance within a sort of private data center or managed service data center can be quite difficult to go through. Obviously, with Azure Virtual Desktop, you're always hosted inside Microsoft Azure Data Center, which obviously has got lots and lots of different compliance. So if you need to do ISO 27001 or anything like that, out the box, you'll already be protected against that when you're deploying Azure Virtual Desktop. So what does it look like? So what we have here is the very high level architecture and what you typically see an Azure Virtual Desktop solution to be. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through each one of these components, and we're just going to talk about some of the things that you think about if you want to deploy them. So first of all, at the very core of it, we need our Azure Active Directory. Okay, so that's a prerequisite to deploying Azure Virtual Desktop. And you also need a proper Active Directory as well. Now, this is where it can get a bit confusing. Because obviously now there are lots of different types. So you've got your Azure Active Directory, which you need, and then you can have you need a sort of proper Active Directory. So you're going to need Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which is the sort of Microsoft lightweight solution of the normal full-on Active Directory services. So you can have AADS, or you can install your normal Active Directory into a VM. So normally we'd expect that to be installed within inside the subscription if you go doing that method. So you can have basically a domain controller on-prem syncing with the domain controller inside your Azure subscription, and then you hook that up using Azure AD Connect onto Azure AD. Okay. And the reason why that is a requirement today, I say today because I'll mention something in a minute which is going to change things in the future, is that your host pools or your session hosts, they have to be joined to a Active Directory domain. Okay. Now in the future that's going to go away, and we'll have the requirement to what we call Azure AD join. Okay, so as you mentioned, first prerequisite was Azure AD. Pretty soon we'll be able to have Azure AD join for the session host, and obviously this user sitting with Azure AD. So that's going to really start to open us up for a really nice login experience, and because basically just be single logon. Okay, or even though, like I say, I log on to my device. And then those credentials automatically pass through, and then I can just launch my Azure Virtual Desktop. So that's where we're going next year. But as it is today, you need to deploy a proper Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, and you will get, for the very first logon, you get 2 logons. But after that, you should only get 1 as well. So looking forward to that. So you've got your Active Directory, you've installed it, you've got your user syncing up to your Azure AD. And what's the next step? So the next step which you need to do to think about before deploying is your networking. Okay, so within Azure we have what we call VNets. So a VNet is kind of what your users connect to. So so what the VMs had as a network card. So we can have multiple VNets if we need to, and inside each VNet you can have different subnets as well. Okay, so if you do have different VNets, then they would need to be paired together using something called VNet pairing, and also you need to have a separate VNet per region. Okay, so if you're deploying Azure Virtual Desktop into multiple regions, then you need to make sure that you have a VNet per region. Okay, those VNets, as I touched upon a minute ago, they can be paired to speak to each other. Okay, and also it's recommended if you're deploying Azure Active Directory Domain Services as well, and you have a separate subnet for that as well, because you need an empty subnet to deploy. Okay, so we've got our core networking in place. What do we need to do? So if we now want to hook up to our on-premise environment, for example, we can then deploy either an express route or a site-to-site VPN. Okay, so that will enable our machines within Azure to be able to speak back to on-prem services. So if you've got any applications or if you've got any user data or those kind of stuff, you need to make sure that you can talk to those. Obviously, it's advisable, if possible, if you're going to Azure Virtual Desktop, that you put as much of those services into Azure or any other cloud provider as much as possible for the best user experience. The best environments that I've seen is where sort of everything is in one central place, rather than going to sort of VPN links. But it depends on the applications, obviously, and how you use that environment. Okay, so as it stands now, we've got our Azure AD. We've got our VNets, we've got our connectivity set up back to our on-premise environment. So what do we need to do now? So now we need to create our storage pools. Okay, so we may potentially be using something called FSLogix, which is what you need to do for your profile management. Okay, so that can sit on Azure Files, which is the file storage solution for Azure, or Azure NetApp Files as well. The general requirement differs between those based on sort of performance. Because Azure NetApp Files is quicker than Azure Files, but it gives you a bit more control as well, but it's double the cost as well. So Only really look at that if you're going to be talking about like 1,000 users plus. Generally, up to like 1,000 users, you should be able to get away with using just Azure files on Premium for your storage needs. So we've got our storage, we've got all our network in place, we've got all our ID in place. What do we need to do next? So next we need to create some images, and then after you've done that, you can start to sort of build out some VMs. So we'll cover that surely in a bit further in this presentation. We'll actually show you how you can do that via the Nerdio console, where we can sort of create our images and then deploy host pools and all this kind of stuff as well. And then obviously once we've done that, we can connect it from our endpoint devices. So with Azure Virtual Desktop, you use the remote desktop app to connect to it, or you can connect via a web URL as well. So we'll show you how to do that shortly. So as you probably gathered, this is all quite complicated, and so if you don't really know it, it can be to get your head around. So our job at Nerdio is kind of to make it a lot easier to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop. So we've been working with Azure Virtual Desktop, basically became, since it was called Azure Virtual Desktop. Before Azure Virtual Desktop, it used to be called Windows Virtual Desktop, and before that it was called RDMI, which is preview mode. And so we've been working with it since then. So we've got over 1 million users under management. And we've done it for 3,000 plus deployments. So I like to say we sort of live, eat and breathe Azure Virtual Desktop. And this is what our product looks like. So as you can see, we enable you to do everything in one single console. If you were to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop into an environment, you jump about into different screens, do different stuff, like have to go to separate screens to do a host pool, separate screens to do all your storage. And so we enable you to do everything from a single pane of glass. Okay, so from here we can create our host pools, we can create our images, we can deploy our MSX habitats, which are applications. We have this thing called scripted actions, which I'll cover later on. We can do RBAC roles, and we looked at logs as well. So everything's logged within Nerdio. So it just gives you a lot better overview of what's going on in your environment and makes your day-to-day management a lot easier as your virtual desktop. Okay, but hopefully towards the end of this presentation, we'll have a bit of time left, and we can do a quick demo and show you the console a bit more in depth. So how do we extend it? So we sit on top of Azure Virtual Desktop. Okay, so we don't replace Azure Virtual Desktop. That's something pretty key. And we basically we like to stick to sort of three pillars, as they say. So we want to optimize to reduce the cost. So if you deploy Azure Virtual Desktop out of the box, it can be quite expensive, especially if you don't do the auto scaling. So we like to help with that by enable the auto scaling really easy. So we can save compute costs up to 75%. So what we mean around compute costs is like the Azure VMs. So within each VM, you have obviously the compute, which is like the CPUs, and then you have the sort of memory and then the storage as well. So there's a cost to all of those. So it's consumption based. So if you leave it running 24/7, you'll pay for 24 hours. If you only use it for 5 hours, you'll only pay for 5 hours. Okay, so as you can imagine, in a large environment, that can massively affect the cost. So using Nerdio, we like to sort of enable you to save up to 75% the compute cost if you weren't using any auto scaling at all. And we do the same thing with storage as well. So we do storage auto scaling. I'll go into a bit further, but we do like swap out the disks. And so lots of different cool stuff. And then automation is a huge thing for us. Automation is essentially what we do. So we like to automate as much as possible to make your life easier. So you can give all this stuff to like a level 1 help desk guy and get him to go and create an image or update an image without having to sort of know a lot of in-depth Azure skills like DevOps and complicated scripting and JSONs and all those things. It's a very easy to use interface. And we also do a lot of stuff around disaster recovery as well. So we can split, for example, host pools between regions. And management is a huge thing for us. So as just touched upon, we can sort of give the solution to a level 1 help desk guy, and he can go and do what he needs to do. So leaving the sort of level 3 consultants level to make your environment as best as it can be. Okay, so how do we optimize and reduce costs? So as I touched upon, compute, storage, time and effort. So compute, basically we enable you to do power management using the auto scaling. So switch machines off when they're not being used. We can do that based on different trigger points. So that's going to be CPU, it's going to be memory. We do user-driven auto scaling as well. So when somebody connects to the VM, it'll power on, and then when they disconnect or log off from the VM, it'll power off. So they're only actually paying for the actual compute that you actually use. We also do storage optimization as well, so we can basically swap out the disk. So within Azure, you have three different types of storage on your hard disk. So you have your standard HDD, which is like a spinning disk, your normal SSD, and your premium SSD. So the difference between normal and premium is the premium has burst capacity, but you pay a bit more as well. So what Nerdio does is obviously you only pay for it what you use. So when the machine's not running, we'll swap out the premium SSD down to a standard HDD, so saving you a bit of money on storage. And we do similar things on Azure files as well. So we do auto scaling based on Azure files. And that basically looks at the IOPS usage and the space usage. And when it sees that IOPS usage a bit high, based on trigger points on the latency, it'll basically increase the storage. So you go into a high tier of storage, so you get more IOPS. So, and then it'll scale it back down again when you're not using it as well. So really cool. No one else is doing that. And we also do FS objects container shrinking as well. So save a lot of money on your sort of profiles, and also enables you to stop filling up and users having a bad experience. So as you can see, all the stuff we do to increase the user experience, make it cheaper to run, and also make the administration environment easier as well. So automation, the images. So we fully manage the images within Nerdio. So image management can be a bit difficult. So we enable next kind of scenario within Nerdio. So I can basically create an image within 2 minutes, whereas previously it can probably take you up to half a day if you do everything manually. But Nerdio does it for you. You'll do the domain join, do the sys prep, all this kind of stuff. So really cool. We do image staging and scheduling of Windows updates and all that stuff. So we do fully support REST API as well. So if you want to integrate to your service now to create help desk tickets and stuff like that, we can do that. And we also do self-healing and notifications and stuff. So everything within Nerdio is logged. So you can basically check to see what's going on with your environment. So if someone rings up and said, "Oh, something's not working," you can just look in the Nerdio console and say, "Oh yeah," you can see like an image was updated yesterday or something, and then you can go sort of troubleshoot that based on what you've seen in those logs. So lots of different options around sort of visibility. And management as well, as I've said many times, because it's our bread and butter, but we just make it ridiculously simple to deploy and manage Azure Virtual Desktop, because say out of the box it can be a bit tricky. So we like to say you can be up and running within 2 hours of doing it. So all the separate components into one, and probably start to finish 2 hours quite easily to create an image, deploy a hostable, and be ready to connect to that image. So if you did that normally within the GUI without Nerdio, you're probably looking about a day to do all the stuff. And we fully support application delivery as well. So we support MSX App Attach. So MSX App Attach is basically application virtualization. Enables you to put your applications into a VHD file. And then you can take that VHD file, plunk it on the file share, and then the host mounts that VHD file, and then the application is made available to the session host. So it sounds simple, but trust me, it's complicated. Within Nerdio, we basically enable you to do that a lot easier than you would do if you're not using Nerdio. So we basically take that MSX file, and then we'll basically virtualize it to a VHD file, and then we'll upload the VHD file and attach it to the host. And you have to have a certificate with each application that you use as well. So we automatically manage that certificate for you as well. So again, we just make your life a lot easier if you're using Azure Virtual Desktop. So based on our experience, as I say, we've done over 3,000 deployments, and we've got over 1 million users under management. This is generally what we see. I mean, cost is the major driver normally when you're talking about Azure Virtual Desktop solution. And when I speak to customers, they normally think it's going to be ridiculously expensive, which if you don't optimize it, it is. But we like to sort of see, this is where we see most of the cost savings that we deploy to. So we deploy, so the compute, we save up to 70% using the auto scaling. The OS disk, as touched upon, are about swapping out of the disk to a different disk tier. FS Object Storage, we use a tool called Shrink FSL, which is written by Jim Woe. He used to work for FS Object, so we automate that. So you can easily automate that to basically shrink your disks, or shrink your profile, sorry, on a scheduled basis. So run that once a month or once a week or whatever you want to do, and that just keeps us cost down to that storage, because storage equals money. So that's generally what we see the split, and then this is what you typically save on each one of those here. So as we just touched upon the VM power management, we can save up to 50% of the costs. Just-in-time provisioning, which means we can burst. So think of a logon screen and a logon storm in the morning where your users come in, and so we can have say 10 hosts out there up and ready. And then if those 10 hosts get busy, we can basically start creating more hosts. So that can save a bit of money as well, because even when you create a VM within Azure, and if you don't use it and switch it on, you're still paying for it. You're still paying for that underlying storage. Okay, so we can basically allow you to just create the host when you need them, and then when the users go home in the day, you can delete the hosts. Reserved instances is an interesting scenario that you'll probably hear about when you speak to people about Azure. So it enables you to basically have a VM where you can be running 24/7 at a set cost. The only downside is you need to sign up to it. So what we generally tend to see is users will have a base workload, and then anything beyond that they may need. So they will use the pay-as-you-go methods. So if you know, for example, you're always going to need a minimum of 10 hosts running with Azure Virtual Desktop, get those hosts on free reserved instances. Okay, obviously it depends on the hours that you use it. I guess the sweet spot needs to be around 200 hours. So if you're using it sort of 10 hours a week, then pay-as-you-go is going to make absolutely perfect sense. But if you use it in normal day-to-day, then reserved instances may help you. We enable you to analyze that within Nerdio as well. There's a tool. And autoscale, which I've already mentioned, you can autoscale the disks when they're not being used. That can save you a bit of money. And then OS shrink. So when you create a VM within Azure, it will be created by default as a 127 gig disk. Okay. Obviously, the cost of that compared to a 64 gig disk is double, right? So every time you go to a tier, you double the cost of the disk. So what we enable you to do within Nerdio is to basically take your image and then shrink it down to a 64 gig disk. Obviously, you need to be careful that all your applications still fit inside it and you leave enough room for Windows updates and stuff. But if you can, it's highly recommended to do so, because it can halve your storage costs when you deploy your host. So then when you've done that, once you create the VM, and then you can just select that 64 gig disk, save you even more money. And as we mentioned before, the FS Logic shrink disk, so we can save up to 83%. Sorry, I'm not going to say you are going to hit those things, but 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to be minimum. Average customer I see probably around between 70 and 75% cost savings. So definitely take a look at those if obviously cost is a major factor, which most of the time is. Okay, so enough of the slides. Let's go and have a look and see what Nerdio looks like, shall we? So I'm just going to go into the Nerdio console. So this is the Nerdio deployed. So as you can see, it's deployed as a web app into your environment. So let's think about this, how we go through an environment. If I just came here today, I want to deploy an environment. Okay, so scenario is I've already got my AD up and running, as we talked about in the first slide. I've already got my VNets up and running. Okay. So now we need to go and create a deployment. So we basically deploy Nerdio, which is just a web app which deploys into your Azure subscription. And then we create a workspace. So a workspace is what your users would connect to. Okay. And as you can see straight away, we can monitor that within here as well. So if I wanted to see what was going on in my environment, for example, I could just go into the workspaces, and then it would just tell you how many users connected, and then we can do exporting, just pulling back the information as we see there. So it sees your highest users. You can do reporting based on different time. So you can do last month, last week, or do a custom one if you really want to as well. And we can export that into CSV. So that's good. So let's go back to scenario. So we've got a workspace. We create a workspace, okay? And then we may want to create an image as well. So if we go down to our images, okay? So and then we need to decide what image version we want to be using. Obviously, most people today use the multi-session image. So you can deploy what they call single-session desktops within Nerdio as well, or Azure Virtual Desktop. So, but most people who we speak to, they normally deploy the Windows 10 versions. So what we can have here, see, we support Windows 11 as well. But you can deploy Windows 10, 20, H2, EVD multi-session. Okay, that's the most popular choice. And from that, we select our VM size, resource group, and we can do an AD join for it. So we can join it to the Active Directory domain. And we won't do this on the image for now. And then we can also install some applications to it. We can distribute it into a shared image gallery, which that basically enables you to deploy it to different regions. Okay, so if you've got an environment where you've got multiple regions or people connected in India, some people in South America, some people in North America, some people in Europe, we can create those shared image galleries in here, and then just type in like test, sick, and then let's go to India, for example, South India, Central India, and then we can go to Central Canada. Okay, and that's basically going to take that image and it's going to make it available in all those regions for you. Okay, obviously you need to have VNets and resource groups in those regions, and then we can just install software into it as well if we need to. So we can go in here and deploy software into the image. So let's go to install Office 365, for example. So we use Chocolatey, but you can install your own. So these are PowerShell scripts. Then install Zoom, for example. And then we're going to install, what else should we install? Yeah, install an AV client. Okay. So click on OK. And basically what that's going to do, that's going to create that image. It's going to install all that software. And we can also do the optimization as well. So let's optimize it. So it's going to go away, create the image, create the VM, and then it's going to run the sys prep, install the software. Sorry, install the software first, run the sys prep, create the shared image gallery, and then copy across those regions, all at the click of a button. Okay, so as I mentioned before, if you did that manually, it's going to take you at least a day. Here, it's taking me 2 minutes, and that'll go away and do that as well. And we can do similar things for image updates as well. So if I wanted to update the image, I'd have to go and click on OK. Just click on OK, RDP onto the VM, or we can run those scripted actions to run it. So if I wanted to run Windows Update on that, for example, I'll just go to type in here, update. Where is it? Update Windows 10. There you go. That one there. Update that, and that's basically going to go away. Power the VM on, run Windows Update, do the sys prep, and have it ready for me. Okay, and then I can schedule that as well. So we can automate this. We can sort of have it do it once a month. So if I want to start that at 3 AM and I want to repeat that on a monthly basis, and I want to do that on the 3rd Thursday. Okay, click on save and close, and that's it. So once a month, the image is going to update itself essentially. So you can completely automated, hands off. And then once we've done that, we have our image. Okay, so we've now got our image that we're ready to deploy to users with the applications that you need to deploy onto it. So then we can create our host pools. So within Azure Virtual Desktop, you have a couple of different host pool methods. So you can have a multi-user desktop host pool where you've got multiple people connected into the same hosts, right? So think of this as your native like session hosts, where you have like 10 people connecting to one host, and then you got your remote app. So that's where you have people not running full desktops, but just single applications, for example. And then we can have our single user desktop pooled, where the users are going to connect to a single user desktop randomly, or single user desktop personal, where it's just a one-to-one mapping of those users. For the best cost savings, normally we see users do the multi-user desktop, but obviously there are the specific requirements where you may want to use a single user pool ones if you're developers, or if you need sort of a lot of resources on a per user basis. That's made for that. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to be looking at remote pool. And then basically just select that, and then we can select the image that we want to use. So we can do the domain join. So that's the image that we just created there, for example. Set the VM size, click on OK. We can do assign, and then we're going to click on OK, and it's going to go and create that host pool. And obviously there's the FSOtic stuff as well. So, I mean, once you create that host pool, obviously we need to create the hosts. So we can do that by auto scaling from within here. I can select the host that I need to deploy, and then that'll go away and create all those hosts for me and ready for the users to connect to. And then also we can create the storage within the FSOtic storage as well from within here. So again, I just need to go on here, click on add files. Again, it's going to do a domain join for me. It's going to enable SMB multi-channel, put the user in there, and off you go. So as you can see, ridiculously simple to use. And dead easy to get up and running with Azure Virtual Desktop. So I hope you enjoyed my session today. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to email me. I've put my email address. Where's it gone? At McLoughlin@getnerdio.com. And thank you for listening and watching.